Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the YouTube channel grecochess. I'm your host, my name is Harry Series, and if you watched the previous videos, we presented games suggested to be by my Facebook friends. We completed all games requested. Of course, if any of you have any more games to request, I'll be glad to present them in future videos. But now we are returning to my own games that I played in a couple of tournaments that I recently participated. In this video, we start with the Connecticut State Chess Championship that took place in Hartford, Connecticut on Sunday, November 3rd. And in this video, we're going to show the game that I played in the first round. Let's first share the details of this tournament. And here we are. Took place Sunday, November 9th at the Trinity College Chess Club. The time control was G45 plus 10, meaning when the game started, every player had 45 minutes on their clocks, and after every move, they got extra 10 seconds. It was 4-round Swiss, and there were various categories. You see here, there was the champion, the top one, the winner of that, or the highest rated Connecticut resident would become the Connecticut State Champion. Then there was the under 2200, under 1800. That is where I participated. There was under 1300, and there were a few other ones for people that were not rated. And before we begin, a big thank you to the organizers because they have provided the chessboards and clocks properly um, set for all the participants. So this made the player's job much, much easier. Round number one, my opponent. His name is Peter Kingsley, and you see here out of all these numbers, the important one is the one you see here. 1597 was his rating. And my rating was 1595, as close as possible, only 2 points differential. But now we are going to go to the chessboard of chess.com, and I'm going to enter the moves one by one, and we'll follow the game. And by the way, I need to make something clear. According to the rules, when you have less than 5 minutes left, you don't need to record the moves any longer. So that is why you're going to see that we'll end up the coverage before the end of the game when a time was less than 5 minutes. And as we mentioned, we start with 45 minutes, 10 seconds increment. After every move, every player gets 10 additional seconds. And of course, players need to complete all their moves before the time goes down to 0. Otherwise, they lose because of time out. And Peter, my opponent, had the white pieces, and I had the black. And Peter starts with, I would say, the second most popular move, pawn to d4. The most popular being pawn to e4. And I reply symmetrical. The first two moves are very symmetric, and I didn't do it on purpose to copycat. Black should avoid it, at least not excessively, but just because I thought at this time these moves were the ones that would help me do my best. Second move, usually you send pawn to c4. If you start with the d pawn, then you follow with the c pawn, but Peter decided to send his knight to f3, and I sent my knight to f6. Third move, bishop to f4. So Peter develops his queenside bishop, and I do the same to the symmetric square to f5. Next move, pawn to e3 to liberate the bishop on f1 that was blocked by the e2 pawn, and I do exactly the same, my pawn to e6. And what is the fifth move? Bishop to d3 for Peter. What should I do? I can take the bishop, but they say to take is a mistake. Of course, not always, but many times. By doing so, I would allow Peter to develop his queen to d3. I could develop something else, like my knight from b8, to give an example, or my bishop from f8. But in this case, I would give Peter the chance to double my pawns on the f file. even though that has some benefits because it gives me stronger control of the e4 square. What did I decide to do? I decided to let him exchange, but under my own terms. Bishop goes to g6. Yes, I get the pawns will double, but at least in this case, I'll be able to take back with the h pawn and liberate my rook from h8. Let's see what does the computer say. Until here, everything was a book move until the fifth move of white, including the fifth move of Peter. But now we are out of the book. My move, excuse me, the computer says it's excellent. You see here the computer evaluation. And just to tell you once again, what we've said many times, on the left half of the board, you're going to see the position as it was on the board. On the right half, you're going to see computer evaluation. Positive number means white is better, negative black is better. You'll see which move would have been the best, comments about the move, and here below you'll see the top 5 moves or the other player whose turn is to come. So after I played my bishop to g6, what does the computer, which is top 316, think? It thinks, first of all, that white is slightly ahead by 0.21. That is not that important at this part. It is just because white started first. What else does it think? It thinks that my best option would have been to exchange bishops on d3. Also, it thinks that the top move for white is pawn to c4, about the same with kingside castling, and followed by knight from b1 to d2, knight from b1 to c3, and bishop takes on g6. These are the top 5 moves for white. Let's see what white is going to do. White is going to play kingside castling, the second best move. Excellence is a computer, and I develop my dark color bishop to d6. Peter can ignore it, and we have exchange on f4, or perhaps take it and take back with my queen. He decides to do something else. Knight goes to e5 and threatens my bishop. Now my bishop is threatened twice. It's defended by the 2 pawns, but this will really leave my king uncomfortable. Of course, he could even use his knight to take my bishop instead of his bishop, so then Peter would have the 2 bishop advantage. What did he decide to do? Well, let's exchange now. Computer thinks I'd rather take on e5. This is the 3rd best move. I exchange on take on d3. And Peter takes back with his queen. Now, what else to do? I want to open a diagonal for my queen. Pawn goes to c6. This has the problem that it blocks the knight from b8 because the c6 square is occupied, but I could also send my knight to d7 if necessary. Pawn to h3 for Peter. In the future, if he ever needs it, he has Luft, meaning escape square for his king, although we are very far from that point. No one in my dreams is any of my rooks or the queen going to the first rank, and even if they did, white has the rooks to take it. And I reply with kingside castling, continue my development. And move number 10. Pawn to c4 for Peter that wants to occupy more space and wants to put his knight on c3 without blocking the c pawn. What do I do? Now turn to, I'm not going to call it liberate, but before the pawn goes to c5 and being strangled to exchange, so I have a little bit more space. If you are under pressure constraint, sometimes it's helpful to exchange. Even though now that the light color bishops have been exchanged, I don't have to worry about the 2 bishop advantage. So I exchange, Peter takes back on e5. But before he does that, we have completed the first 10 moves of each player. And let's see what's happening. The computer gives a slightly bigger advantage to white, to Peter, 0.62. Still not critical yet. It has not yet decided the game. But as I've said, always better you have this advantage than your opponent. In this case, it's the other way around. Worse that my opponent had it, and I wish I had had it. But Peter is going to take with his bishop on e5. My knight goes to d7 and attacks the enemy bishop. And Peter wants to have his bishop and sends it back all the way to h2. And by doing so, of course, we're still too early, but at least temporarily, he removes the Luft, the air that he had given to his king. But we are very far away from this becoming significant. And I want to take more space. My knight goes to e4. But Peter attacks it with a pawn. My knight goes back to f6. You may be wondering, wasn't it a waste to send the knight back and forth? Computers, by the way, thinks that mine was a great move. What happened is I weakened the e3 pawn that's now protected only by the queen on d3. If I'm able to attack it twice, currently I don't even attack it once, but should I attack it twice, this would give me at least some pressure. Pawn to c5 for Peter. You see, if you check before, it was not even among the top 5 moves here. And usually you don't like to release the tension unless you have to do so. Yes, Peter gains a little bit more space. Computer thinks it's good, but far from being the best. My rook goes to e8. You have the rook attack along the e file. As we mentioned before, the e3 pawn has been weakened after the f pawn moved from f2 to f3. Knight to d2. Peter develops his knight. And now time for me to start gaining more space. My pawn goes to e5. Best is a computer. At this point, we completed the first 15 moves, and Peter has an advantage of 0.4 TSC. Here, the game is still being, I don't want to use the word played, but it's still being debated, if you can use that word. But what does Peter want to do? He wants to strengthen his pawn on e5 by moving his pawn to b4. And I continue getting more space. My pawn goes to a4 and threatens the queen on d3. Peter takes with the pawn and opens his I mean he opens the f file. His rook occupies it, and now the file from closed becomes semi-open. Semi-open because there's the f7 pawn. And I'm going to use my knight to take the pawn on e4. Computer says the best. Peter doesn't want to change the knights and sends his knight to b3. That is not even one of the top 5 moves. Computer would rather have him exchange, but he sends his knight to b3. Computer thinks a mistake, and finally, for the first time since the game started, I am ahead. I have the advantage 0.34. My queen goes to e7 to exert more pressure along the e file. Inaccuracies as a computer would rather have the rook first, so I have the rook in front of the queen. Usually, if you have a battery, you prefer the queen to be at the back. Rook goes to e1 for Peter to challenge the e file, but computer thinks inaccuracy. Once more, I'm ahead. My knight goes to f6 to protect the other knight. And Peter now pushes his pawn to a4 to get more space along the queen side. And what do I want to do? I want to start an attack towards the enemy king. So I send my knight to h5, and you may wonder why send my knight on the edge of the board. A knight on the rim is grim and ready for the trim, as I say, but this will be only temporarily. And at this point, we completed the first 20 moves, and now I am ahead, even though I'm ahead by only 0.15. Let's see what's going to happen. Rook goes to f5 to attack my knight on h5. Inaccuracy says the computer. My knight goes to g3 to attack the white knight. Knight goes back to f3. Queen goes to g5 to give more protection to my knight. And from here on, I can even start some threats. Queen is at least indirectly seeing the g2 pawn and the e3 pawn. Knight goes to c1 for Peter to bring the knight back to the game because it was a little bit offside on b3. Of course, Peter has done the back and forth, not exactly, so on d2, b3, c1. My pawn to h5. I want to include my pawn in the attack. Knight to c2. Fraction from c1 to e2, I'm sorry. And now I'm ahead by 1.07. Computer thinks inaccuracy. My pawn goes to h4 to give extra support to the knight on g3. Computer thinks it's inaccuracy. Would rather have my knight go back to f5. I didn't like it because the rook on f3 was attacking it, and I would need my queen on g5 to defend it. That's why I played pawn goes to h4. And now time for Peter. He sees that there's a lot of pressure, and it's time for him to start exchanging. First the bishop, that was doing nothing outside on g2, just being blocked. And in fact, I was hoping I would keep the bishop blocked on h2, but unfortunately, that was not the case. And my knight would take on g3 the bishop. And at this point, we completed the first 25 moves. Computer would rather have my pawn taking there. I wanted to open the e file for my rook on e8. Now I have the pawn on e3 to attack twice by rook and queen, rook e8, queen g5, defended twice by rook f3, queen d3. Who knows, I might be able, if I added, for example, the knight on f5 to be able to take this pawn, but still, if the knight on e2, white takes and sends it anywhere else, then the rook on e1 also defends. And we completed the first 25 moves. The game is even. As you see, Peter has a very small advantage of just 0.01. Let's see what is going to happen. Exchange of knights for Peter, that by doing so, he makes it even more difficult for me to attack the pawn on e3. It's attacked twice. Queen g5, rook e8, defended 3 times. Rook e3, queen d3, rook e1. So even if somehow I'm able to take my a8, rook at a8 to attack it, I would need at least 2 moves. One to move the e8 to send it to e7, e6, somewhere there. And the second time to move the rook on e8. Still, we have 3 attackers, 3 defenders. And now my pawn on g3, I was hoping so much on this pawn. If everything else could disappear and I could send a rook or a queen on the first rank, it could even be checkmate. But unfortunately, my pawn is going to have a tough time. Currently, it is attacked by the rook on f3 and defended only once by my queen on g5. And it's not so difficult to have it a second time attacked. All you need to do is move the e3 pawn when you can safely do so. Currently, if you do it, you have a nasty pin. But if you could do it safely, then it's very, very difficult for me to defend the pawn on g3. And let's see what's going to happen. And Peter wants to exchange queens, sends his queen to f5. Not only that, if I, for example, move my queen to h6 to give an example, or e7 or anywhere else, no, e7 no, but if I send it to h6 or d8, then I lose my pawn on f7. And I do what the computer suggests it would be the best move. Exchange the queens and hope for the best, because really we're talking the g3 pawn is going to be in a tough situation. Yes, temporarily it's not attacked by the rook on f3, but later rook could go to g5 and attack it. And to minimize the chance that that could happen, my rook goes to e4. Computer thinks the best. I might lose it, but at least I could get the e3 pawn if I'm successful. Rook goes to f4. Let's delete the move. Sorry, that was the wrong move. That was not the move that took place. The move that took place was the rook from f5 went to f4. So what will I do now? I can exchange the rooks, but in this case, I'm given the e file for the rook on e1, which I'm not going to do. I can do nothing, and then Peter can exchange them, and then my pawn lands on e4, but I'm not sure how safe it is. And that is to do what the computer thinks the best move. Don't initiate exchanges. Put your rook on e8, so if Peter was in exchange, the rook can go down. And Peter decides to start his own exchanges. Great moves in the computer. I also, of course, will take it back with my rook, the best move. And at this point, we finish 30 moves. 30 moves, and the computer thinks that the game is absolutely even. And what's going to happen? Peter's goal is how to win the pawn at g3. And myself, I want to save it, but I cannot just put my rook on g4 because the pawn at h3 will take it. So that's why I'm going first to reroute it, first to send to e6 and then to g6. Computer thinks a mistake. I'd better start attacking with my f pawn to support it. And what would happen if I did this? Here we go to e2. Yes, I would try to use pins and support it. Unfortunately, that's not what I did. This is move number 31, and after my mistake, the computer thinks that now white has the advantage. Peter is ahead by 0.87. Still not that critical yet, but it starts becoming important. And believe it or not, at this point, we reached the point where a time was less than 5 minutes, so I stopped recording the moves. But a small summary of what happened later is that Peter was able to win the pawn at g3 and continue with one pawn ahead, continue all the necessary exchanges. I was trying to fight back, but unfortunately, what I could do would only work if Peter would miss the best moves, which unfortunately he did not. He got the best moves every time, every one of my threats, and finally I lost a game. At this point, we are going to give a look at what happened. We're going to give a look at the review and see the evaluation. You see, the game was more or less even with me being a little bit ahead in a couple of points. Accuracy, 90.6 for Peter, 89.5 for me. We played as if Peter's rating was 2450, way ahead of the 1597. Mine was 2400. Both of us played 800 points above our rating. I'm not sure how much I can trust this thing. And let's see the various categories. No brilliant moves. Peter had a grade. Best 12 for Peter, 11 for me. Excellent for each of us. Good 4 for Peter, 5 for me. Book 5 for Peter, 4 for me. Inaccuracies now. 2 for Peter, 5 for me. Mistakes 3 for Peter, 1 for me. And I had a miss. This concludes the first round of the Connecticut State Championship. And we'll continue the next video with the second one. In the meantime, let's give a look at what happens in the tournaments. Grecochess, nothing new the way we know it. Two players have guaranteed advance to the finals. Barak 7 from Israel and Maiskin from Italy. Maxim Govoruka from the Ukraine has done his best, 4 wins in 4 games, and is waiting what will Hunting Achievements do. Who has, how long does he have? 13 days to respond. And group number 3, it is me, the Harry from Greece, versus the line from Hungary. And let's go to the other tournament, the Underwater Moonlight, the 9 Moons tournament. More and more games have been completed. You see 458 have been completed, 190 to go. And let's see all the groups one by one, what's happening. Group 1, Lotus Time Chess, 13.5 out of 14. A great performance that almost guarantees his advancing. Not too many people can catch up with him. In fact, it completely guarantees, because the only person that has any chance to override him is Canon 1972. He has 3.5 out of 6. So theoretically, if he wins his other 12, he can reach 15.5. But even at second, in this very unlikely case, Lotus Time Chess has already advanced. And also for the same reason, Oli Combo from Australia has also advanced his 11 points. And once again, not exactly. He might try with Marku 1409 and be passed by Canon 1972. What would happen if they tied? It depends on how Canon 1972 would do the other games for the tie-breaking points. So Oli Combo is very near advancing, but Lotus Time Chess is the first of the 27 players that is guaranteed he's advancing in the next round. Group 2. Spider 99 from Egypt leads with 11 points. Group 3. There's a tie with Vien Carvanans from the United States and the organizer of the tournament, Zanilor from Italy, leading with 10 points. Zanilor has only one game to go, but Vien Caravans has 5 games, and also the tie-breaking Vien Caravans has more points. That's why he's leading, but too many games remaining. Group 4. We have a perfect score. Iraq Lion from Iraq has 8 wins in 8 games and is ahead. Group 5. Chinan Fu from Greenland, 12 out of 13 points. And let's see. Hishikaradin is advancing. Not yet. There is a theoretical possibility because if AMMT from Indonesia wins the other 3 games and Peon Perez wins the other 2, and Master Excalibur wins the other 5, they might be able to pass him. Group 6. Mathis B, 2008 from France, has 12.5 points. And he would have been perfect had he not timed out against David 8 by 8 by 8 by 8. And Davis 8 by 8 by 8 by 8 has 7 wins in 7 games, one of the few remaining people that have not lost any point or even half of a point. Group 7. Gendar 66 from the Ukraine leads with 14.5 out of 16. And let me see, has he guaranteed advancing? Tragis from Brazil might tie him. Moebius from Nigeria may pass him. And Firulastro from the Basque Country, I didn't know this flag, cannot pass him. So General F66 from Uzbekistan, I believe, has guaranteed advancing. The second player is guaranteed he's advancing. Group 8, it is my group, where Khaled Kadab from Egypt is leading with 7.5. I'm second with 7, but I'm second with 7 wins and 8 losses, which means that my chances to advance are very, very limited, to put it mildly. And Group 9, let's see what's happening. We already had Hikaru Kalsenthal from India being eliminated for fair play violation. Lessa 4101 from Brazil is perfect with 5 wins in 5 games. And who are the leaders? Steam Rocket from Australia and Joy Yu Jake from South Korea. And also Lua000 from Spain are leading with 8 points. In the tie-breaking, Steam Rocket has 32, Joy Jake has 31, and Lua000 from Spain has 28. And if you wonder what are the tie-breaking points, every time you win against someone, you get as tie-breaking points the number of points that this player has, or will have until the end. If you get a draw, you get half of these points, meaning you are encouraged to beat the stronger players. And at this point, we conclude the coverage of my first game in the Connecticut State Chess Championship. At the next video, we'll continue with the second round. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. Thanks to the viewers. Thanks to all the likes and encouraging comments. I'm Harilas Aniziris. This is my Greco Chess YouTube channel. For now, goodbye.